He was the guy the entire British press mocked, all because of his hair color. A blonde James Bond preposterous. The whole country jeered. Tabloids splashed sneering headlines, and thousands signed petitions against him within days of the casting announcement, but he didn't let that wave of ridicule get to him. Daniel Craig turned every prejudice into fuel. From a boy who once slept in parks, he rose to stand tall in Hollywood, bringing in nearly $4 billion for the Bond franchise and crafting a new kind of spy cool, quiet and deeply human, off-screen. He lives in multi-million-dollar penthouses in New York, drives an Aston Martin like he's still in the movies, but refuses to pass his $160 million fortune to his kids. He serves as a United Nations ambassador, donates tens of millions, and quietly steps back from the spotlight, no longer needing the stage. So, who did this man, once rejected by a nation for not fitting the part, ultimately become, and what makes Daniel Craig so different? What makes a kid dare to dream big when the whole world seems stacked against him, while most of his peers were still tucked safely in the arms of their families? Daniel Craig had to learn to live among fragments of broken marriage, a home that kept changing, and fragile dreams in the gritty, grey streets of Liverpool. Born in 1968 in Chester, England, Daniel grew up in a family that wasn't whole. His parents split early, his mother an art teacher, his father running a pub, and he and his sister Leah had to move to Liverpool to live with their mom. Those early years were unsteady, where money was always out of reach, and security was something nobody could promise. There were nights when Daniel wandered alone, too broke to get home, curling up on a park bench as if the world had slammed its doors shut on him. But in those darkest moments, something remarkable happened. His mother took him to the Everyman Theater, where the glow of the stage lights first met the eyes of a 6-year-old dreamer. It wasn't just a night out, it was the birth of a love that would never fade. At 16, when most kids still don't know what they want, Daniel made a choice that worried his whole family. He joined the National Youth Theatre, dropped out of school, and headed to London alone. No money, no connections, just a pair of hands ready to wash dishes or wait tables, and a heart that wouldn't give up on its dream. In 1988, after 3 years of scraping by and chasing that dream, Daniel was accepted into the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, one of England's most prestigious art schools. From a boy sleeping on park benches to a student at an iconic institution, it wasn't just a milestone, it was proof that a dream, when fueled by effort, will find its light. Could a penniless kid really reach the spotlight? Or did fate have more tests in store for him? What do you do when every door slams shut in your face after all the effort to break into the world of art? Daniel Craig didn't find the dazzling stage he'd imagined, but cold hallways, forgettable roles, and the sting of being overlooked in a city far too big. Graduating from Guildhall in 1991, Daniel stepped into the film industry with every ounce of hope, but harsh reality quickly brought him back to earth. His first role in The Power of One in 1992 was barely a blip. He quietly appeared in TV shows like Zorro and The Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, then faded away as if he'd never been there at all. The entire 1990s were a long stretch of bit parts, Love and Rage in 1998, The Trench in 1999, films few remember, faces nobody noticed. But Daniel didn't walk away. He stayed. He endured, quietly honing his craft, and then a door cracked open. In 1996, a lead role in the mini-series Our Friends in the North put Daniel alongside Christopher Eccleston and Mark Strong. The show didn't just earn critical praise, it marked the first time Daniel left a personal imprint on screen. Not through looks, but through depth and a quiet intensity that carried weight. Yet the biggest test came nearly a decade later in 2005. When he was offered the role of James Bond, a dream for so many, Daniel faced a firestorm of criticism. Blonde hair, sharp features, lacking the classic polish of past Bonds, people mocked him, tore him apart, even launched a website called blondebondsucks.com to protest his casting. Then, Casino Royale hit theaters in 2006, and everything changed. The film raked in over $500 million worldwide. Daniel, with his icy stare, deliberate stride, and a wounded inner world, didn't just become a new James Bond, he redefined the entire franchise. From an unknown actor, ridiculed for being different, he rose to global icon. But did that spotlight truly bring happiness? Or was it the start of pressures he'd never faced before? What does success look like when you fought for every inch of it? It's not luck, nor is it just timing. For Daniel Craig, every step to the top was built on sweat, pain, and a stubbornness some called reckless. The camera pans in close. A man steps out of the shadows, blonde hair tousled, eyes steely with resolve. This isn't the classic spy in a tuxedo with a smirking charm. This is the James Bond of the 21st century, cool, complex, and Daniel Craig. Since Casino Royale in 2006, Daniel didn't just revive a legendary role, he made the world see 007 in a whole new way. Quantum of Solace in 2008, Skyfall in 2012, Spectre in 2015, and No Time to Die in 2021. Each film was a new chapter in how the world defined a hero, no longer an untouchable icon, but a man who could fall and rise again in his own way. Close-up action scenes, dialogue so quiet they chill, eyes that hold more questions than answers. Daniel infused Bond with a new life, less glamorous, but layered with more emotion than ever before. The result? Nearly $3.5 billion in global box office revenue, from an actor once mocked for not being handsome enough. Daniel became the face that made an age-old film franchise a goldmine. For his final Bond film, No Time to Die, he earned a paycheck of $25 million, a figure unthinkable for the young man who once washed dishes in London. Success didn't stop at the screen. From a $3 million fee for Casino Royale, Daniel quickly climbed to Hollywood's top tier, especially after No Time to Die. His net worth now surpasses $160 million, not from a flood of roles, but from choosing the right moments, the right characters, and sticking to his principles. But after the gunfire, car chases, and red carpet walks, Daniel returns to a different version of himself, simple, quiet, and living as if he were never a global star. Daniel Craig lives in the heart of New York like a deliberate shadow, choosing places no one expects, and living in ways few imagine for a global movie star. His $2 million penthouse in Tribeca is a perfect example. It's not a place to impress the press, it's a place to disappear. Converted from an old industrial building, the apartment has high ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a view of the Hudson River. Daniel once told a close friend this was the first place he could sleep through the night after years of relentless filming. In the living room, there's little more than a piano, an old bookshelf, and natural light spilling across the wood floor. It's the kind of space that brings you back to yourself. But the home most tied to the idea of family is likely their $6.75 million brownstone in Brooklyn. No one expected a Hollywood star to settle here, a quiet neighborhood of teachers, journalists, and middle-class families. But Daniel doesn't care about living somewhere befitting his status. He tends the garden himself. Rachel bakes in the white-tiled kitchen, and their young daughter plays under the fig tree in the backyard. A neighbor once said, "We never see bodyguards, just Daniel pushing a stroller like any other dad. In Hollywood's noisy world, this might be the only place he can truly be a father, a husband, and just a regular guy." Outside the U.S., Daniel keeps a small home in Oxfordshire, England, untouched by paparazzi and unknown to most. He returns a few times a year, cycling down country lanes, stopping at the local pub, and living for weeks as an anonymous man. Locals call him by his real name, not James Bond, and that's likely why he holds on to that house, even if it never makes the headlines. Despite owning multi-million-dollar properties across 2 continents, Daniel Craig has never let bricks and mortar define his worth. For him, a home starts with a feeling of peace, not a price tag.
What is it?
No flash, no Bond branding, no gold plating, but every card Daniel Craig chooses speaks its own language, quiet, decisive, and not for the crowd. Many think James Bond is why he owns a $300,000 Aston Martin DBS Superleggera, but it's the other way around. Daniel is why that British brand feels cool again. When Casino Royale's director asked him to learn to drive it for a chase scene, Daniel insisted on training himself, no stunt double, and later bought one. For him, the DBS isn't a status symbol, it's a reminder I got here, with my own hands. Likewise, His charcoal gray Audi R8 V10 worth about $160,000 is the car he drives on days no one's watching. It's not a head-turner, not loud, but it can accelerate and corner like it's gliding through pressure. In a brief Berlin interview, Daniel half-joked, "I don't drive to impress, I drive to disappear." Beyond high-performance cars, Daniel keeps a 1994 Range Rover, used during shoots in rural England. The leather seats are worn, the paint faded, but he brought it to his Oxfordshire home. A neighbor noted, he still drives it to the farmer's market sometimes and always parks it right, no one has to ask. Not a car collector in the Hollywood sense, Daniel owns just a few each tied to a milestone in his life. The first Aston Martin, a gift from the Casino Royale producers, remains untouched. No mods, no new plates, just cleaned and stored, like a keepsake, he once said. "I don't keep cars for their value, but for what I did to earn them." Out there, they call him the sexiest man alive, but behind the wheel. Daniel Craig is simply a man who craves quiet and lives on his own terms, no matter what people expect from a multi-million-dollar star. Daniel Craig lives as if the spotlight never found him. He doesn't use social media, doesn't make noisy statements, and all but vanishes from the press when he's off set. His daily life revolves around simple things: black coffee at dawn, old detective novels, and a Liverpool FC soccer match every weekend. Even in Manhattan, Daniel likes to shop for groceries himself, cook with Rachel, and pick up his daughter from school like any other dad. He spends carefully, doesn't collect designer labels, and hasn't launched a personal brand. When asked about wealth, he just smiles. Being rich isn't for showing off, it's for choosing how you want to live. And sometimes it's in that simple way of living that you see the true grit of a man who was once James Bond. Daniel Craig married Rachel Weisz in 2011, and they've kept their private life under wraps. They don't flaunt their kids, rarely attend events together, and steer clear of tabloid traps. But in that quiet, you see something lasting. With the community, Daniel doesn't make loud calls for attention, he just acts quietly and consistently. Nearly $100 million has gone to charities for children, theater artists, and education projects. In 2015, the United Nations named him an advocate against landmines, not for photo ops, but for real work. And above all, he said he won't leave his massive fortune to his children. To him, dying rich is a failure. Maybe it's that choice: quiet, kind, and unflashy. That's the real legacy Daniel Craig leaves for the next generation. What happens when fame becomes a cage? Daniel Craig once dreamed of stepping onto the stage, but when the spotlight hit his face after the announcement that he'd played James Bond, what he got wasn't applause, it was a barrage of mockery, controversy, and even websites calling for his firing. In 2005, when he was named the sixth Bond, Daniel didn't just take on a role, he inherited a legend, and for many, that was an unforgivable sin. They called him too rough, too cold, his blonde hair unfit for a spy. The website blondebondsucks.com popped up just one day after the news broke. Tabloids dubbed him Farmer Bond. One TV channel even aired footage of Daniel, wearing a life jacket while rowing, poking fun at the cowardly new Bond. Daniel laughed, but then he went quiet. In a later interview, he admitted, "I didn't leave my hotel room for 3 straight days. Not out of fear, but out of disappointment. Nobody saw his effort. They only saw that he didn't match their expectations." Then came the grueling days of filming. During Quantum of Solace, Daniel tore his shoulder so badly it required surgery. In Spectre, his knee dislocated, and by No Time to Die, he broke his ankle. Yet every time, he returned to set, performing his own stunts, not for ego, but because he didn't want audiences to see anyone else in his character. But physical pain never hurt him as much as the loneliness. At the height of his fame, Daniel said he felt like I was acting in a room where no one really looked me in the eye. Personal struggles and a private life under scrutiny. In 1994, he divorced Fiona Loudon after 2 years of marriage. Their daughter, Ella, lived with her mother. In the years that followed, tabloids linked him to Kate Moss. Then Sienna Miller, but Daniel never confirmed a word. He got engaged to producer Satsuki Mitchell, but quietly called it off in 2010, right as his career was peaking. It wasn't until he met Rachel Weisz that Daniel truly closed a turbulent chapter. She was the only person he openly appeared with at events, not because he needed to announce it, but because there was nothing left to hide. They built a home grounded in respect and understanding, not fame. Few know that the person who helped Daniel through his darkest career moments was Hugh Jackman. They acted together on Broadway and became close friends off stage. It was Hugh who texted Daniel daily during his injuries, sent books, shared music, and even cooked for him after knee surgery. Friendship, love, and time away from the camera, those were the three things that kept Daniel going. How do you stay true to yourself when the world sees you through a distorted lens? When people only see the icon and no longer the person you really are? And by answering those questions, Daniel Craig stepped into his final chapter not to shine brighter, but to leave behind something greater than any film scene. What makes someone a true hero when the lights go out and the cameras stop rolling for Daniel Craig? His legacy isn't in the number of films he's made, but in how he chose to face pressure, fame, and the power Hollywood handed him. He wasn't the first James Bond, but he was the one who redefined the character for a new generation. From a glamorous icon, Daniel turned 007 into a human being, someone who could love, hurt, fail, and die for what he believed in. That wasn't just acting, it was a way of life. In 2022, Daniel was honored with the CMG Order from the British royal family, the same rank held by the fictional Bond he brought to life. A made-up hero and a real man, finally standing side by side in the same thread of history. But he didn't stop at the movies. As a United Nations ambassador, Daniel has worked on campaigns to support war victims, children affected by landmines, and global education projects, from Kenya to Colombia, from forgotten rural villages to high-level meetings. He shows up not in a tuxedo, but with a quiet resolve, a man who believes art is just the starting point for a greater responsibility. And perhaps the philosophy he once shared sums it up best: if you die holding everything for yourself, you've missed the chance to make a difference. From a boy sleeping on park benches, Daniel Craig became a man who not only dared to dream, but learned what to hold on to and what to let go. His silence often speaks louder than 100 press statements, and it's that careful selectivity from the roles he takes to the way he lives that makes people trust him for the long haul. When it's all behind you, the lights, the applause, the cinematic glory, what's left? A character, a fortune, or the way you lived that makes others want to be a better version of themselves.